The annual gala at Harrington and Wells Financial Group was the most anticipated event of the corporate calendar. Every year, the grand ballroom of the Whitmore Hotel was filled with executives in tailored suits, shareholders in designer gowns, and the kind of laughter that only comes when money is no object. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please stay with us and watch this story till the end. If there is any mistake or shortcoming in our story, please kindly forgive us and support us with your love, patience, and encouragement. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. And tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from. Your support means everything to us. The marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and a magnificent Steinway grand piano sat at the center of the room like a crown jewel, polished and perfect, waiting for the evening's hired pianist, who had, unfortunately, cancelled just 2 hours before the event. The CEO, Richard Harrington, a tall, silver-haired man who wore arrogance like a second skin, was furious. He barked orders at his event coordinator, paced the lobby, and made it very clear to everyone around him that failure was not something he tolerated. In the middle of all this chaos, a quiet man in a grey uniform moved carefully around the edges of the room, collecting glasses, wiping surfaces, and staying invisible the way janitors are expected to at events like these. His name was Elias Moreno, 53 years old, with calloused hands, tired eyes, and a gentle way of moving through the world that people in power rarely noticed. He had worked at the Whitmore Hotel for 11 years, always on time, never complaining, always invisible, as Richard stormed past him for the third time, barely acknowledging his presence. One of the younger executives, a woman named Claire, made a careless joke loud enough for half the room to hear. She pointed at the grand piano and said, "Maybe we should ask the janitor to play. I'm sure he knows a few nursery rhymes." The group around her laughed. Richard smirked. Then, without thinking, he said it, loud, mocking, the words dripping with the kind of casual cruelty that powerful people often mistake for humor. "Sure, if you can play Chopin, I'll marry you." More laughter. Elias stopped what he was doing. He looked at the piano. He looked at Richard. And then, without a single word, he walked across the ballroom floor, pulled out the piano bench and sat down. The laughter faded. A strange silence settled over the room. People exchanged confused glances. Richard opened his mouth to say something dismissive, but before any words came out, Elias placed his fingers on the keys and began to play. The first notes of Frédéric Chopin's Ballade, number 1 in G minor, filled the ballroom with a sound so full, so deeply human, that it stopped every conversation in the room instantly. His fingers moved across the keys with a mastery that was breathtaking, not the stiff precision of someone performing for approval, but the fluid, aching expression of someone who had lived inside music for decades. The chandelier light caught the movement of his hands. The executive stood frozen. Claire slowly lowered her champagne glass. Richard Harrington, the man who had never been silenced in a boardroom in his life, stood completely still with his mouth slightly open and his face draining of its usual confident color. Elias played the entire piece from memory, every rise and fall, every quiet heartbreak buried inside Chopin's notes. And when the final chord dissolved into the air, there was a long and total silence. Then someone began to clap, then another. Then the entire room erupted into applause, the kind that is not polite or obligatory, but completely involuntary, the kind that comes from being genuinely moved by something beautiful. Elias stood from the bench, straightened his grey uniform jacket, and turned to face the room. Richard walked toward him slowly, his expression no longer mocking but something far more uncomfortable, shame. He extended his hand and said quietly, "I owe you an apology." That was extraordinary. "Who are you?" Elias shook his hand calmly and said, "I am the janitor. I studied at the Warsaw Conservatory 40 years ago. Life took me in different directions, but music never left me." He said nothing more. He picked up his cleaning cloth from the cart by the wall and went back to work. The party continued, but something had shifted permanently in that room. Claire did not laugh for the rest of the evening. Several executives approached, Elias before the night ended, not to take photos or make speeches, but simply to say thank you. One woman wept quietly and told him that her late mother had loved that exact piece. The hotel manager, who had watched everything from the doorway, gave Elias the following Monday off with full pay. Richard Harrington, to his credit, never told the story publicly, but those who were in the room that night never forgot it either, because sometimes the most powerful person in the room is not the one with the biggest title. Sometimes it is the one with the quietest dignity and the deepest gift, moving unseen through a world that has not yet learned to look properly. Elias Moreno taught a ballroom full of important people something that no business school ever could, that every single human being carries an entire universe inside them. And the only tragedy is when we are too proud to notice. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories, where every story reminds us of the goodness that still lives in this world.